Hello and welcome everybody to episode 250 of the DanJohnUniversity.com podcast. I'm Dan John and it's episode 250. Well, that's great. The reason the episodes have been going on for so long is because of you, gentle listener, and your great questions. This is a question and answer podcast. Remember, if you have questions, send them to podcast@DanJohnUniversity.com. I'll do my best to answer each and every one. It's been almost 10 years, I guess. We've been doing this podcast. At the beginning, it was that dark room upstairs with the crappy lighting, and now I've got, all this fancy stuff, and I don't know. It's been a fun transition. I sit down every week, I answer your questions, and sometimes I look back over the 10 years and I'm amazed at the things that have changed and the things that haven't changed. One big thing this week is, now this is my copy. This book came out this week, The Armor Building Formula, Bodybuilding for Real People by me. And if you go online to danjohnuniversity.com/bookstore, you'll find this book as well as the Easy Strength Omni book and the Easy Strength for Fat Loss book are all there. They're in PDFs, and if you want a hard copy, do what I do, just print one out. In this day and age, the way things are going with those online stores that are named after rivers, they're really hard to work with, and honestly, it kind of breaks your heart when you see how much the author gets for a book that Amazon sells. Let me just say it nicely. Ain't much. Ain't much at all. It's stunning. So good enough. Let's get started, and we're going to answer some questions. So let's get going, okay? Carlo asks a question. Recently, I have experienced multiple traumas in my personal life that have resulted in mental health crises and significant lifestyle disruptions in general. I was a student of physical therapy in a local state park rover. These unfortunate circumstances have left me without either occupation, and I was hoping to get your input on how to dedicate myself to a life reset. I am receiving the proper mental health care that I need, ECT, medication, therapy, so I'm not necessarily soliciting that, but strength and conditioning training has always been the grounding factor in my life. Carlo, me too. And all of us go through tough times. And sometimes you don't even realize that someone is going through a difficult period. In my youth, I remember one of my brothers would come home from the war. Just some strange things would happen, and you almost have to remind yourself, something else has happened since the last time, you had an interaction. I know a lot of people who've struggled the last few years with work issues and the divisiveness of politics and some other stuff. And life can be tough. And so we got to make sure we support each other. So thank you. And for me, going in the weight room with my friends really does seem to help me keep it on, I guess. The discipline has fallen by the wayside, and I'm in need of a resumption in order to heal. How would you suggest working back into training in such a way that does not yield discouragement due to lack of performance and ability? I prioritize barbell and dumbbell training. Great. Lots of sled work. I'm loving this. And of course, kettlebells for strength endurance purposes. You know what? I'm impressed just by the way you outlined your stuff there. I think, in my workshops, I call that the killer app approach. You utilize equipment for what they're best at. Not, look, I can do this, but rather what that piece of equipment does best. Yeah, I like that. The problem is I am wading my way through a deep depression and ascending out of it slowly. Okay. Is there any particular approach that you would recommend for someone like me who is experiencing major life changes and a significant amount of loss recently? Well, there's two things I think you really need to. Now, I got this thing called the inner circle. But one of the nice things about the inner circle is that we have 12 weeks to kind of walk everybody through the way I see goal achievement. Now, if you join danjohnuniversity.com, there is a free course there called the Goal Setting Course. And the 5 best tools I know to help people are in there. And I'm just going to share them with you right now. Basically, we're going to write down 20 years in the future, what do you want to be like in 20 years? How's your health? How's your finances? How's your social life? It's the 2 decades. It's called the 5-2 assignment. So this is the 2 decades. What most people discover in the 2 decades apart is that you get a real sense of what you value in life. I mean, I'll be honest with you. When I add 20 years to my age now, I get a little frightened. I mean, not a lot of people in my family make it that old. Very few, in fact. And, in the last few months, I've buried, some cousins. And of course, I buried my brother, and I've buried some other people who are very important to me. I'm starting to, I remember growing up and, burying my aunts and uncles. And now I'm burying my first cousins. And, not long from now, it'll be my turn. So what's good about the 2-decade thing to start off, and it's not a negative thing at all, is when you write down how do you want to be in 2 decades, it gives you a chance to think about things. I have a friend of mine, his name is Merrill. Now, Merrill was an eyewitness to the first atomic bomb blast. He also flew 48 missions, combat missions, which is pretty impressive. And the two of us will get together and talk, and one of the things I keep emphasizing to everybody is what I learned from Maureen down at the Senior Center. She always reminds us that for longevity, connection and exercise, let's say it better, connections and movements are the best things you can do for longevity. I just this morning heard about a bodybuilder who's 90 from California, who's still competing. There was also Charles Euster, who was still competing as a bodybuilder and sprinter, I think until 99, age 99. So for me, one of the things I do is I look at those lives and I think, okay, so maybe 20 years from now, I still need to be focused on body composition. I still need to be focused on living a healthy lifestyle if I want to get there, financially and things like that. But what it does for you, Carlo, is it really gives you a chance to look at your own values. As you sit back and look what you want to be 2 decades from now, it gives you a real chance to say, okay, what's important to me? What's core to me? And I know it sounds maybe vague for someone who's going through a tough time, but it's very helpful, because if you do what you're supposed to do with your therapy, your medications, your lifestyle changes, whatever it is, you need to be able to say, in 2 decades, I'm going to be okay. It's an important thing to say. I know a lot of people who are in various 12-step programs, and I'll be sitting with somebody who'll tell me they've been 35 or 40 years sober. And it's fascinating to have that conversation. And you'll say, could you imagine 40 years ago projecting where you'd be now? And it'd be like, it's an interesting conversation. I'm not going to quote anybody, but it's interesting. The next part is 2 years from now. For you, I would like you to think 2 years from now that you're back in the groove in your training. You're pulling the sled, you're pushing the sled, you're doing your kettlebells, you're pulling the barbells. Give yourself the whole 2 years. I think that's sometimes the most forgotten of the steps in the 5-2 program. But you can do amazing things in 2 years. There's a cliche that goes something like, people overestimate what they can do in a day, but completely underestimate what they can do in a year. And I will just double underestimate what they can do in 2 years. From there, we move into something a little bit shorter, 2 months, 2 decades, 2 years, 2 months. I don't know when you're going to hear this, but just look at the calendar and 2 months from now, say, okay, 2 months from now, I'm going to have my barbell set out. It's going to be, my gym area will be clean. I'll dust off, make whatever. Make these very low-end decisions. I'm going to lift 3 days a week and make sure I do, just a few things. And give yourself a real look at it and say, I can do this. From there, 2 decades, 2 years, 2 months, and then today and tomorrow. I kind of lucked out today because I have my journal in front of me. But, I have this daily pirate map I use. And every day, I start the night before. I wake up to the smell of coffee. I do my to-do list before I go to bed. Number 2 is I go in the sauna here every day and do 10 minutes of original strength. Number 3 is like I lift 3 days a week, I ruck 1 day a week, I do mobility 1 day a week, and I walk extra the other 2 days. And the other one is I eat vegetables every meal. I try to eat 8 different vegetables a day. I also try to have what I call gut biome breaks a day. That's when I eat, like, sometimes it's something as simple as a piece of fruit and some sauerkraut. I've had some bad luck with the kimchi lately, so I'm moving back to sauerkraut a little bit more. Kimchi can really smell up a house if it's not good, just as a warning to everybody. And number 5, of course, is is our family mission statement. Every day I try to make a difference. It's a very simple, it's very organized. It doesn't seem like much, but if you can sit down with someone you trust and go through it and have them go through it too, you really get some insights about you get some insights about what you value as a human person, but you also get some ideas that if you take care, and like I do every day, if every single day I do those things for my body, every single day I do something for my finances, every day I declutter or I clean a part of the house. If I do those small, tiny little things, 20 years from now, I might be saying on this podcast, I can't believe it's episode, whatever it's going to be by then. So I hope that helped. If you're interested, we'll probably won't have another inner circle for a couple months, probably in the fall. But certainly at least do that goal achievement course over there. Get a sense for this 5-2 assignment and see if that helps. Once you get the 5-2 assignment, once you have a feeling of what your pirate map, your daily to-do list for your whatever your goals are in 2 decades, I think you'll start to feel the energy come back. I'm not a huge believer in discipline. Obviously I'm a coach and I know when I see it, but very often someone like myself, a coach, a trainer, a chef, does all the work for you. So it's my discipline that keeps you in great shape. And I talk about this actually in depth in my new book. So give yourself some grace and give yourself some space about the idea of thinking that there's like a switch in your head that you're just going to flick on and all of a sudden all your dreams will come true. Coming back to training, and no matter what got you away from it, injuries, illness, travel, the draft, civil or natural disruptions, give yourself some time and space to get back. Okay. I hope that helps, but it is, as you can imagine, it's a difficult question to answer on a podcast. And I hope there's some things in there that will assist you, and do your best. Okay. And if you need to get a hold of me, ping me at the website and I'll do my best to help you out. Okay. Thanks. We have a question from David. That's a great name, David. That's my confirmation name. You talk quite a lot about the ABC program, Armor Building Complex, and as a rugby player, it is absolutely perfect for my needs. Wow, that is good to hear. I would also hope you do some running. But instead of asking you for sets and reps, I wanted to ask you about the prep work before starting it. What kind of warm-ups or stretches do you use getting the hips and body ready? I got a note from Ozzy. Ozzy's the one who edits and sends them to me. He says, don't give away the book for free, which I thought was funny. The new book is out, Armor Building Formula. DanJohnUniversity.com/bookstore. It's reasonably priced, and if you get a PDF almost instantly, and if you want to print it, just print it yourself and save us all a lot of problems. So listen, and David, just so you know, I think warming up has just been overdone it's funny how we are about warm-ups and cool downs as in the fitness industry. Sometimes you'll hear this thing, and there's truth to it. If you don't have time to warm up, you don't have time to train. And I always nod my head like this, and But then I remember my brother Gary, and after Gary came back from the Army and after the war, his vision of warming up was just so different. Now, I was young. I think I was in the 7th grade here in the United States, so that probably puts me, 12 or something like that. But I just remember how it was like he just was like shrug. He would just shrug about warm-ups, be like, do what you got to do and don't make it a big deal. I look at kids, I think about myself as a kid, and I still see it here. If someone showed up with a new basketball, we'd go up to the high school, go to the courts. Nobody did like a 20-minute stretching routine and did this, did mobility work, or, we didn't run any laps. We just played basketball. We'd kind of shoot around for a few minutes, we'd do our little things. And, I'm sure that if you're in a country that soccer football is the king of sports, I can guarantee the kids in the streets, they're not out there, before a game. They're, just a pickup game. They're not out there, let's go touch our toes for an hour. So for me, I think this way about warm-ups, David, and I kind of talk about in the book. In fact, I quote Ghostbusters in the book because it's just like, yeah, well, if you need to warm up, warm up. My shoulder's stiff. Well, do more stuff. Well, my hamstring's tight. Well, loosen it up. I like to have a little bit of sweat on. Well, get a little bit of sweat on. I know, especially for someone who would come from an American football background or rugby, there is so much team warm-up built in. Frankly, the longer I coached American football, the more I became much more of a track coach. It's like, well, let's have practice start at 3:15. If the guys want to warm up, they can warm up. Or let's just go, because, what warms me up isn't getting exhausted. And what I began to pick up on with the athletes is they would all dog it in warm-ups. They would pretend like they were going hard, but they were just dogging it. I didn't think that was a good transition. So I don't know, that's just a thought. Warm up as you need to warm up for any program, okay? When I'm doing like my Olympic lifting programs, I do complexes, which are, so you're holding on to one barbell. I'll give you the one that my discus throwers did today. Snatch grip RDLs, Romanian deadlifts, followed by snatch grip high pulls, followed by snatch grip hang power snatches, followed by overhead squats, followed by good mornings, popped it over and finished with rows. It's a long complex. It's complex C. But it's real valuable. This is a variation of complex C. But if you do that for 3 sets of 8 rounds, so that's 8 Romanian deadlifts, 8 high pulls, 8 power snatches, 8 overhead squats, 8, everything's 8, 8, 8, 8. You do it for 3 rounds, you're probably as warmed up as you're ever going to need to be in your life. So kind of depending on what you need, if you're a substitute player, you probably are sitting around. I mean, I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but I can remember when I played American football one time. I was a sophomore or junior, I guess, and I was kind of just, I wasn't starting at the time, and I was kind of staying on the sidelines, kind of being a typical high school dumb kid, and all of a sudden I heard, Danny John, uh-oh. And I ran up, yes, get in there. And it was like, I went from standing around talking to my friends about all kinds of things, probably none of it American football. And next moment I was on the field, for the rest of the game. My warm-up was going from Danny John to out on the field to play and then play. One of my best throws in my junior college years, because of a problem with the schedule, I showed up just before I threw my first throw. My first warm-up throw was my first competition throw. And my second throw was my lifetime best. I mentioned that in a couple of my books because I think it's in Now What for sure, because it's an important story, because there's warming up, mentally, physically, emotionally, and all the rest. And then there's what the warm-ups that every single parent listening knows. It's 3 a.m. and Lindsay walks in the room and says, I don't feel good, and then vomits on your chest. As a parent, when someone vomits on your chest, you don't roll back and say, call me in 3 hours and I'll help you. You rally up. So for me, I know this is a lot of stuff and it doesn't make a lot of sense, but for me, I like very formal warm-ups. I do. I think there's real value in them. But I also like having my athletes and anybody else I work with practice very, very abbreviated, very short, very tight warm-up windows. So there's going to be a spectrum here. There's going to be There's going to be shades, hues here of what a warm-up is. Maybe way away from your season, you probably should take the warm-up a lot more seriously. The early preseason or the later part of the off-season. Because then you want to worry about joint-by-joint mobility. There's probably some areas of your body that probably need a little extra love, a little extra flexibility. If rugby players like American football players, your hamstrings tighten up a lot during the season and your shoulders take a beating and your neck. So maybe and way away from the season, expand those warm-ups for more tissue work. That could be, I don't know if foam rolling is good or bad, but it seems to help some people. The extra mobility work that help a lot of us. Maybe a little extra targeted flexibility work for the stuff you need. Maybe longer warm-up sets and reps getting going. With the armor building complex sitting by itself, because the load is relatively light, a lot of our listeners probably could just walk into the gym right now, walk up to double 24s and do the 30-minute, 30 minutes every minute on the minute, 90 squats of it. It's a lot of work. There's always somebody who asks, the armor building complex, double kettlebells, double kettlebell cleans for 2, single double kettlebell press, triple double kettlebell front squat. There's times I've gone into things and just kind of warmed up with the weights. When I was training at the Pacifica Barbell Club, we would do some specific flexibility work. For us, it was the wrists and the ankles, and shoulder dislocates too. But most of our warm-up was taking the empty bar, doing some snatches, throwing some light weights on, doing some snatches, throwing some more weight on. I can remember times where I think our warm-up for the snatch, with the 3 of us lifting at once, Pete, Eric, and me, I don't know, we maybe did 10 sets of warm-up snatches for triples each as the weight got to our working weights. And then we stayed with triples a long time. So we were well warmed up when we got to the heavy singles. Obviously, there's times you just step in and go too. So somewhere in that spectrum is the answer. Okay, David? And I would say this, and just kind of the earlier in the year for you, for your training, I would say the more you should warm up. And as you begin to get closer and closer to the season, still take care of your joints, still take care of your tissues, obviously, but see if you can swap out more work and less warm-ups. Okay, thanks. Good question. Rob says this: I'm a strength coach at a 45 and up small group training gym. That's great. I'm currently using Easy Strength for fat loss for my own training, and some medical issues have set me back in the gym over the last few years. I love the program, and I like feeling energized when I'm done, not like I've been beaten up. Thank you. And I really appreciate that statement, Rob, because I think a mistake a lot of people make when they start thinking long term is that you should still train like the last 6 weeks before a major bodybuilding contest, or maybe 8 weeks out from, some world championship. A lot of us just need, the strength movements, the walk, some reasonable mobility work. And thank you very much for being here. Yeah, thank you. But of all your work, the program that really excites me and makes me jealous of anyone who can do it is Mass Made Simple. I'm 52, 6'4", and overall in good shape, but my strength is half what it was, and my body composition isn't what I want. My question: if you scaled Mass Made Simple to an appropriate load, and assuming good joint health and mobility, do you think it's a viable option once I'm done with Easy Strength, or do you feel like this program is better left for young athletes? Mass Made Simple is probably one of the best programs I've ever put together. It is a total do this program. And the problem is, and Rob, you've already hinted to it, nobody wants to do that. So Dan, what's your secret to gaining mass? Oh, in 6 weeks? Oh, sure. You got to eat a ton of food, and you got to do high rep back squats. You got to do complexes. You got to do big push lifts like the bench and press and the one arm press. Yeah, and it's going to suck. Can we modify that? Well, yeah. I mean, I can't stop you, but, you know, I know that Mass Made Simple as written works. For hypertrophy work, what you're talking about, and I got to, with the armor building formula, I wrote that specifically for people like you, Rob. People like you. So doing Mass Made Simple is hard, and it's the value, and you're 52, and adding body weight in your 50s is fine. Lean body mass is fine, and I think is wonderful. Having said that, I will quote once again Archbishop George Niederauer, who one time said he had gotten some advice when he was younger, and that's why he went on the Atkins diet. He said, when you go to the golf course, you see a lot of old men, and you see a lot of fat men, but you don't see a lot of old fat men. And Archbishop's point to me was, if you want to live a long time, you got to choose. I'm not saying you're going to get fat on Mass Made Simple. You might add, most people add a little bit because you're just gorging yourself. But there's one guy who complained about the program. He put on 12 pounds of lean body mass in 6 weeks, but he also put on 2 pounds of fat. So he thought the program was a failure. And I'm like, I mean, that's pretty good. 12 pounds of lean body mass. That you're, just stop gorging yourself with that lean body mass, and the calories would, the calories that lean body mass will quickly make that body fat disappear, according to the numbers, completely. Yeah, I'm not against the idea. I'm not, Rob. I think there's some value to it, but I'm not going to be the person who's going to scale down Mass Made Simple. We tried it years ago. We called it Lean Made Simple. And I remember Mike Warren Brown kind of making fun of me and the other person who were trying it. We were trying to lean out on a high squat program. So we were using goblet squats. And got to tell you, folks, doing a set of 50 in the goblet squat with 24 kilos or 32 kilos or 28 kilos, whatever is appropriate, it's an eye-opener, man. It is so much harder than you think, because your arms are you're in a half curl. Well, even if you're rested here, you just never give your arms a break, and you never give whatever you want to call this, your core, your column, whatever, a break. So I've tried it. I couldn't make it work. You might, but honestly, I just wish you'd just go over to the armor building formula and go that direction. If you're doing easy strength for fat loss, and then you slid over to either the barbell recommendation in the book, or even the kettlebell with the traditional armor building complex, I'd like to see you follow, especially try the first 3 weeks in the barbell program for sure, and just get a sense if just that small amount of effort might be enough for you. Because the first 3 weeks in the barbell program are just 2 exercises. And then after that, you add another one, which makes it very hard. I said 2 exercises. It's the barbell clean and press and the curl. So some people might count that as 3. But I think you'd be wiser to do that after easy strength for fat loss than a Mass Made Simple derivation, which you're going to, even if you send me follow up, here's what I'm thinking. I have no idea if it's going to work or not, because I've never tried it. And I really do try to stick with what I know and the experience. It's a fun question, and thank you so much. Okay. Appreciate it. And let me know what you decide, ping the podcast, or let me know somehow. Okay. Thanks. Got a question from Nate. I have always noticed that there seems to be a mental similarity amongst all the great athletes. I know you've talked about your experience with the switch, where you slip into an area of performative focus and heightened intensity, and that seems to be a space that most high-level athletes are able to find themselves in on command. I know many athletes that want to be great, and they may even have the physical qualities needed to be great, but mentally they are not able to consistently deliver intensity in training or on the field of play, despite it being clear it's not a want of want on the athlete's part. Have you noticed this as well? Of course, yeah. Yeah. Every single day. It's stunning. You'll see these magnificent athletes come, and they're very often on the men's side, tall, and their shoulders are just, they just look like models. Their shoulders are broad naturally. They don't do anything. And very often, oddly, with all that talent, when the gun goes off, when the ball goes into play, whatever, you just see that fade of performance. And how have you addressed this? Thanks again, Dan. I know many of the questions lie in the realm of it depends, and sometimes you got to do what you got to do, but general, actionable tools are always appreciated, regardless if it's a placebo or not. My mind goes back to Mr. Miyagi and him rubbing his hands together. I say, Mr. Miyagi, I think, is a good coach. I have a whole system for it. Book's called Now What? It's available at On Target Publishing Books, otpbooks.com. Basically, I've got a couple of different systems. By the way, a lot of the stuff I do in the inner circle is in there. I think it's a good book. Intervention, Can You Go, and Now What are the three books that are textbooks at a lot of universities. It's interesting how much I say the same thing in every book. The appendices are massive and give you all kinds of ideas. Oh, even Easy Strength is in here. My gosh, why do I keep writing books? But the thing about Now What is that I want you got to think about three things. I make this little triangle in the book. One is physical tension, and that's when you're max deadlifting, you're probably at a 9. When you're sauning, with a couple of beers, you're probably a 1. If you're hot tubbing, with a margarita, you're probably a 1. 1 isn't a good place to compete at, and 9 isn't a good place to compete at unless you're deadlifting. So what you want to do is you want to find that physical tension level that's ideal in your sport. This is the first thing I do. We have this conversation, and very quickly, I always tell my throwers, I always smile before I throw. And then they say, why? And I say, well, because I'm about to win. And then they say, why? How do you know that? Because I'm about to throw the discus. Ha, ha, ha. But I know that if I smile before I throw, my physical condition for the discus is where it needs to be. Now, in the clean and jerk, that physical tension is going to have to be a lot higher. So that ties us now into the other side of that called mental arousal. So, you'll find that very often, this is a much longer thing, but, when they have these warm-ups for these, like the Super Bowl especially, and they just keep another, and now, after they do America the Beautiful, then they have a whole group of kids, sing Up With People, and then they bring in some country and western singer who sings the Star Spangled Banner, which should take this much time, but they've expanded it to 20 minutes, and then the planes fly over, and then, and then this comes out, and then that comes out. The game was supposed to start at 5, and now it's 5:45, and everyone's been standing around. Very often you'll notice at the highest end sporting events, the first few minutes of a championship game are often kind of boring. It's because the players who were ready 45 minutes ago are kind of hanging around. So one of the things I coach is I practice getting them to control their mental arousal. If you have too much and you have a complex thing you're trying to do, it'll hurt you. Like if you're too fired up as a hammer thrower, you're going to really struggle throwing far. You have to bring yourself down sometimes. Other times you have to bring yourself up. If you're standing there, giggling right before a max deadlift, that's when the snap happens. There are people who can do that. And I actually try to train my athletes to do that, to be able to snap on. It's hard. Oh, and the bottom of the triangle is heart rate. I think you should really know what your heart rate should be at for your personal elite performance. And you should try to stay in that kind of 10 So for me, I noticed as a discus thrower, for example, that when I was in the 90 to 100 range during a track meet, that's when that meant I was warmed up, I was ready to go, but I wasn't panting or anything. Sometimes being out of breath isn't going to help you throw the discus far. There are our Olympic lift. I mean, obviously being out of breath is what's going to happen at the end of the 400 meters. So that's how I do it. And the book is called Now What? There's a whole system that's just part of it. There's much more to it, of course, obviously. And we also drink deeply in appropriate practice, which I think is one of the more misunderstood things. Practice makes perfect. Practice makes perfect. No, appropriate practice makes perfect. And you see it all the time. Coaches will do all these things, but it's not the way it happens in a game. There's a classic study. I used to use this at St. Mary's with my students, but it was interesting. They didn't care about this because I was trying to tell them the pitfalls of studies, but sometimes students don't kind of hear all this. But the person did a study. They found out that I think it was Division I basketball players make 67% of their, on one-on-one situations, they shoot 67% on the first shot in a free throw. All right. So this person did a study and got a whole bunch of Division I basketball players and had them shoot 10 free throws in a row and then made all these very interesting points from the study. Well, if you're not hearing it, it's a terribly flawed study. No one shoots 10 free throws in a row in a typical basketball game. Typical, I don't even know how you would, I think it's possible to get 5 free throws. I think if you get a technical foul at a certain level on a 3-point shot, I think it might even, and you also get the ball back, which is kind of interesting. But that's 5, and that's very rare, and it's only one level of basketball that can happen. So but the study also found that even in this study, that these guys, 67% of the time, the basketball players made the first shot. It was just like in game time. Well, in a study like that, you should have just taken 2 shots or maybe 3. 2 is probably all you really needed. And just study that and then study what tools you could use to make those 2 free throws. And for me, that's appropriate practice. Having people stand around shooting free throw after free throw after free throw is not what happens in the game. I would probably do a lot of free throws in conditioning practice. Like, you run or get tired or do some, you do a bunch of full court layups, and then stop, blow a whistle, and have the person shoot 2 free throws while they're still huffing and puffing, because that's more game-like. So that's what the book's about, and I hope it helps you. I do think I can train you to turn things on and off. I do think that. But it has to be done appropriately. Great question, and thank you. We got a question from Mike. For Lent this year, I decided to follow an orthodox fasting protocol. This entails abstaining from all meat, dairy, alcohol, and oil. Though traditionally there are more lax restrictions on the weekends, I decided to go all in for the full 40 days. Currently, I am writing to you towards the end of February, and I've decided I'd like to up the ante, so to speak, for the March portion of Lent. Yeah, I don't get the questions that fast. Yeah, sorry. My plan for this monastic experiment is to only eat potatoes for the entire month and also fast in the gym by only performing squat snatches. Wow. Just remember, you're going to have to eat some kind of like dairy product. Potatoes with dairy, I believe, are a perfect protein. And because potatoes have vitamin C, it should be sustainable. But you're going to have to eat dairy or you're going to have to eat some other kind of protein to fulfill the gap in potatoes. I know this won't be answered in time. Thanks for understanding that. But I think I'd like to make this an annual Lenten practice. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on something like this. Well, are you saying only potatoes and squat snatches for a month? Yeah, you take those gallon of milk a day and, high rep squat people and you one-upped them, man. I think these kinds of things are wonderful. Yes, they're crazy. Yes, they're insane. Yes, there's big issues with it. But what's going to happen on the other end of this, Mike, is you're going to have, well, for one thing, people will notice that your face is going to lean out big time because of the potassium in potatoes. Rusty Moore, he uses potato hack when people are getting ready for photo shoots or weddings. You only eat potatoes for 2 days before the photo shoot. I'm not recommending this. I'm just telling you what he said to me. I think it's brilliant. I like it because, it's short. It's short. It's violent, in a sense. And I think there's some real value to it. And if you can pull it off as an one time, I'd like to know how it went. I really am interested in how it went. I am a big fan of fasted workouts. I'm a big fan of challenges. I think what most people misunderstand, and of course it's just the nature of the internet. Everybody, I was having a nice talk about a week ago with Lebestark, and people love these hooks. They love. I think it's called clickbait. Let me tell you why, Dan John is an idiot, is going to get a lot of people clicking just to get mad at you or applaud you, really. So, yeah, I like challenges. And I realize sometimes the challenges sound insane. But on the other end of a challenge, something happens. Like if you do the 10,000 swing challenge, you do it in the month of January. If you finish it, you're so far ahead of the other. Only 1 in 20 people maybe do any of their resolutions. But at the end of January, if you've done the 10,000 swing challenge with an online group, February rolls around, you're ahead of everybody else in a sense because you got this thing done. And it's a little victory. And I'm a big believer in compiling tiny victories on top of each other. In your case, it's not a tiny victory. This is a big deal. I like the idea. I think you need to be sensible about it. But if you're doing this annually for religious purposes, for your personal health, for your, I do think your squat snatch is going to get better. I don't know if you're going to snatch, 200 kilos or anything, but it's going to get better. I guarantee you that. I like the idea. You've picked the food that I would choose with additional protein. And the lift I would probably choose. The other option would be Clean&Press. So I like it. Fasted workouts that only have one exercise. Challenges like this have great value. Now, for caveat time, it's going to be tough. And you're going to have to ask yourself at the end, was it worth it? But since you've tied it into a religious tradition, I think it's a pretty good idea. So thank you. I hope that was clear. All right. Got a question from Eric. I'm on the second round of easy strength. I'm 45, 6'2", 245. I've lost 70 pounds over the last 9 months. Eric, that's impressive. And I have committed to improving my health and strength. I recently completed easy strength for kettlebells, and I'm now in the easy strength for fat loss programs. Well, this is awesome. I plan to move on to your hypertrophy recovery program next. I am new to overhead squats. What would you recommend to learn this lift and improve mobility to get the most out of it? If you're doing the hypertrophy recovery program, that's not it's an option to do in that program, the overhead squats, but I would suggest the first time through, do just good old-fashioned back squats. Now, I'll answer your overhead squat question in a moment, but for those of you listening who don't know what he's talking about, danjohnuniversity.com, you can just go to the workout generator, and in there, you can do all these programs. And it's just, you push a button, and we spit the program out to you. If you want to read more on it, then you go to the documents section, and there's all my, according to people online, I talk too much. My over the top, explanations come up next. Well, Yeah, in the hypertrophy program, mobility program, which is originally called the post-deployment, the reason I have those other options is a lot of the guys I work with in the military, once they get through the first round of it, the back squats are too easy. It's basically, I want you to back squat your body weight for 25 reps at the end of this 3 months, which isn't, I don't think it's ridiculous. 4 months, it's not bad. But after, a lot of those guys are such big engines that I needed the challenge of the front squat and the overhead squat just to make them think long term. Now, if you're new to overhead squats, just you're on YouTube. So go to my spot and go to my goblet squat to overhead squat drill. I've got a couple of drills on here, but the best one is, and it's also part of the perfect program, but that might be even easier for you to look at, Eric. The nice thing about the perfect program, Eric, is that I show you my favorite exercises in there, kind of, sort of, the easiest to teach, easiest exercises to kind of master. You drop down with a goblet squat, you curl the weight to the ground, you pick up a broomstick, you stand up with it, you squat back down, broomstick down, curl the weight up, goblet squat down, repeat. I think that's the best way now, to learn overhead squats. When I learned it, we were, my coach, Coach Notmeyer, pushed me down to the bottom. He stuck his knee in my back. My job was to push my knees apart as much as I could. And then I felt him take the bar and just drive it into my body. And that's how I learn. There's great value in it, but you need someone who knows what they're doing, pushing you into the ground with that barbell. It gets you instantly flexible, I'll tell you that. So that's what I would recommend. Check out those goblet squat, overhead squats. You could probably even throw it in the warm-up of the post-deployment mobility hypertrophy program. Thank you, okay? Good question. We got a question from Nick. He says, call me blasphemous, but even after doing both the RKC and RKC2, I prefer the kettlebell seesaw press to the single arm press. Always have. Yeah, me too. The groove feels more natural. I agree. I find it carries over better to other activities, golf, for example, and it's more time efficient than having to press 2 arms at the same workout. All right. The question is, what would you recommend for a standard to aim for in this press? I'll be straight with you. I don't particularly care about one rep maximum strength anymore, but I do love to have an arbitrary benchmark to inch toward in the long term. Okay, Nick. In Harry Pascal's books, he felt that, you should be able to do 110 pounds per hand or 120 pounds per hand. And he had someone who he considered strong. I think it was 60s per hand for males. So if you're doing kettlebells, I would say if you can seesaw press the 24s or the 24s as a male, I'd kind of nod. Yeah, of course. 28 32s, you're starting to inch your way up into that. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then once you get into that 36 plus area per hand, I think that's when you're getting in that rarer air. If you're doing the beast, which is the 48 Ks, and you're doing the seesaw press, and if you're doing the seesaw press while walking with the 48s, I would say that you're strong enough for just about anything you need to do in life. All right? Thanks. That's a fun little question. Yeah, thanks. We've got a question from Rick. I'm a long-time kettlebell lifter, but I've recently started Olympic lifting and I'm making steady progress. Doesn't everyone love being a beginner? Wherever you work out, the weights just go up and it's wonderful. And then the reality of all sports. I'm really trying to develop good technique, so I'm not adding any real weight yet, but I'm still finding it very trying. I've joined a weightlifting club, which runs a 3-day week program, which includes accessory work after the main lifts. What kettlebell work would you program in around this, as I like to do workouts at home on the days I'm not doing the Olympic lifts? Well, as you add load, you're going to find those 3 days a week all you can even think about. I remember working with Jim Schmitz. Now, Jim Schmitz was the coach at Sports Palace. He was also the American Olympic lifting team coach many, many times. and he was our coach. And that was something that, my coach, Dick Nottmeyer, we were all the same team. Pacific Barbell Club competed with Sports Pals and as our team. And, Dick loved 5 days a week and Jim loved 3. And Jim's point was, my lifters are stronger than the Pacific Barbell Club lifters, and they need more time to recover between their heavier workouts. And I thought, that's interesting. In my life, I have realized that 3 days a week for most people is probably the correct number of times in the weight room a week. Obviously, you can do more, because that's going to be the first thing someone says, well, I want to do more. But many people then have to lighten the load, and then some of the workouts just become nonsense, which is fine. I mean, because that's what happened. To me, that's just natural. Not every workout is going to be, something that inspires the next 40 generations, So my first thought is on this, Rick, is that I wouldn't do anything. But my next thought, because you are a kettlebell enthusiast, you might want to look at something like, I've got this, the armor building formula is kettlebell workouts, there's in the book, there's a whole much more than that, but it started out with pure kettlebells. I mean, there would be value in the armor building complex for you. It will get your, heart and lungs, going pretty hard. You get a chance to do extra front squats, which is often the issue for American lifters. But you're not going to have your arms like this. You're going to be in that comfortable position like this. So your hips and your knees and your ankles and your feet and everything from about here down is going to get a chance to mobilize and lengthen and be a little bit more flexible. So the armor building complex might be something you want to consider. I would also consider moving into those. When I first started doing kettlebells, I call it kettlebell Tai Chi. The Turkish get up, the windmill family, that stuff that, sort of gets that strange kind of flexibility, that you get from the kettlebell exercises. So one thought, top of my head, armor building complex once a week. The other day, Turkish get-ups and some windmills. Be reasonable. Keep an eye on things. But I do think kettlebells can complement the Olympic lifts very well. And I've been doing that for a huge amount of my career. So thank you. All right. I appreciate it. It's a great question. Doug asked a question. I have a question regarding delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS. And if you view it as something that is destructive or helpful. And with your training methods, how do you guide your athletes and members around DOMS? In my younger years as a gym practitioner, I would you'd wear the soreness as a badge of honor and enjoyed the feeling as it was a way of my body telling me that it worked hard. However, now as a busy family man, he finds DOMS destructive and requiring longer hours to recover. Can muscle be built without experiencing regular delayed onset muscle soreness? You will find, no matter what program you do, that the body will adapt and soreness will dissipate. Now, I know a lot of people say they should do there's this phrase called muscle confusion, which is kind of interesting because I know what is trying to be said with muscle confusion, but trust me, your muscles don't get confused. Your muscles do one thing, and that's to pull, to contract. Okay, that's what they do. They do this, and and obviously the nervous system has to really work around to do this versus this. The nervous system has to figure out a lot of work there. Interesting. All I'm going to do is reference a study that was just a few years ago. Whether or not I like it or not, it doesn't matter, but it was interesting, is that they found that taking any of those, I think they're called NSAIDs, the aspirin, the Motrin, those things, after a workout to, get rid of the soreness, actually hurt your gains. And the body, the body needs to know what it's responding to. And if you pop this other thing in there that stops the soreness, stops the inflammation, whatever soreness is. I'm not 100% sure I know entirely what soreness is. If you've ever run in a competition of 400 meters where that lactic acid just literally seems like it's lighting parts of your body on fire. My teammate John King, we had to run a 4x4 in a track meet one time, and he was our shot putter, and the video of him trying to sprint through the last 100 meters, it is, I wish I had it. It did look like a bear jumping on a bear, because he was a huge guy. And then we all know that weird, like a great way to get, sore almost for every listener is just go over to any stairwell in the world and do 200 calf raises. Just do them, It is interesting that high rep calf raises make a lot of people have the urge to have a bowel movement, which I've always found just a fascinating thing about the human body. But you do that, or like what happened at discus camp years ago when we had that jump rope thing, and we could barely walk up. We could barely walk for 2 days, 3 days. What does that soreness mean? Well, it means you did something you haven't done, and you did way too much of it. Does that kind of soreness lead to long-term muscle growth? I don't know. Does not training for a 400 meter and then running as fast as you physically can and in a race and then get all that terrible burn, does that build muscle? I don't know. So there's another kind, that kind of localized muscle soreness we get from lifting, that might help us long-term with hypertrophy, bodybuilding gains, muscle gain. Certainly will help us in most cases with being stronger, more load on the bar in the future. But what that soreness means or doesn't mean, I almost sometimes feel like you move into a moral theology question, where this is right and this is wrong. I will get sore. I just don't bench. I haven't benched in decades because I just don't. I got some good advice from someone years ago to drop bench pressing. Don't worry about the whole thing. But I know if I was going to the gym right now and I was going to put on a little show for the kids, and I know I could probably bench press a pretty good weight, and then tomorrow I would be so sore right there and right there that if you touch them with a feather, I'd probably fall down. So, but does that mean I'm suddenly going to show up like, Arnold in 1974 with those pecs? No, it just means I'm sore. Soreness is a tough thing to follow. Soreness is a tough thing to figure out. So I would say accept soreness when you change exercises, when you change rep schemes, when you change load, but don't accept soreness as the answer long-term, okay? All right, thank you. Okay, we got this is our last question today. This is from Andre. Question number 1. I've recently been interested in double kettlebell work. I love your armor building complex. I'm curious to hear you talk about the kettlebell clean and press versus the kettlebell clean and jerk. How should I think the benefits, contrasts, and programming of one versus the other? I just answered this question a few editions ago. For most people, I like the kettlebell clean and press because I just, when I was 14, I think I've mentioned this many times, I wrote down in my journal that 50 years from now, if all I did was clean and press and snatch, I would cover every muscle group. I had this little chart in my, it's funny, it's the start of my movement matrix. I used to always put charts in my journal, and I would check mark the body parts I hit that day to make sure I got all the body parts. I find it kind of fun to think back about that. And it's not bad. I still think that clean and press for most people is what you need. Now, the clean and jerk, and I'm talking about the clean and jerk, not the push press, with the kind of the double jump or the double slap technique, however you want to say it. That is a bit more complex. There probably is a little bit more of a learning curve. The upside is, if you're wired like me, you can go on you can, and the weights are light. You can probably kettlebell clean and jerk for a long time, because I'm boom, boom. I'm going to use very little upper body strength, locking those things out overhead. Personally, I would say the kettlebell clean and press is better for most people in most situations. It doesn't mean it's superior, or it's people doing the clean and press are more right than people doing clean and jerk. Now, obviously, if you're doing the sport of kettlebell clean and jerks, you got to clean and jerk. But for most people, most of the time, clean and press. Question 2. I have MAPS, middle-age pull-up syndrome, again, second time. I have been so careful with pull-ups and not overtraining, but a task with a sledgehammer gave it to me in my right arm. Other than resting, what have you found to be most useful in recovering from MAPS? What can I do to build up the strength resilience to be less prone to MAPS going forward? When I wrote this book, one of the chapters in this book is I would like to apologize to everybody about the cult of pull-ups and chin-ups, because for most, I went through, I'm going to say maybe 24 weightlifting books written in the 40s, 50s, and early 1960s, pre-drug era. And, early 60s, but, very rarely were pull-ups mentioned. And I was talking to some older guys who also, like I did the President's Physical Fitness tests in school, which I still think we should do. I think they're marvelous. You, as a child, you get a chance to figure out what you're good in. The only time we did pull-ups was for that test, though some of us would train up a couple of weeks for the test. I think it's only in this millennium, since post-2000, is that the pull-up has become, I got to be careful here, because, someone's going to, cite some video, movie, some article. But for most of us who were there, the pull-up was the thing you tested on. It was like the shuttle run. No one ever worried about the shuttle run until we're asked to do the shuttle run. And if you don't know what the shuttle run is, I don't know if I can even explain it to you. You ran back and forth, at least at our school, picking up little sandbags and put them to the other side. The first thing I'd recommend is maybe it's time for you, Andrea, to retire from the pull-up and chin-up stuff. And it's sad to see that the sledgehammer gave it to you too. But anybody I know who gets golfer's elbow or tennis elbow tells me the same thing, is once you get it, it is really hard to get rid of. One thing I do think there's value to is making sure you work on your wrist mobility and making sure you work on your shoulder mobility. I have a physical trainer friend of mine. He's a physio for the Europeans. And he's a real believer that anytime you have a joint in the middle of two other joints that keeps going bad, make sure you spend quality time focusing on those other two joints too. If you got a little tweak in your shoulder, it could just change the physics, the biomechanics enough that everything just goes right into that elbow. True or not, I'm just telling you. I get a lot of, there's always a lot of advice following this particular question, but, I know people have told me that, putting on, there's a tennis and golf elbow compression thing that you can put on here that gives support. It's a kind of a full-time, a permanent, not a permanent, you can take it on and off, but it's just for the elbow. That helps some people. But sadly, it still goes back to rest and not re-injuring it. But like you say, you keep doing it, and you just might be at a place in your life where you need to maybe focus on your lower body for a few months. I don't know, do a really hard squat program or front squat program, or I don't know, a bunch of hinges or whatever, and let that, just kind of ignore it for a while. Remember, if you're working your legs, every time your heart pumps, all that good stuff, all the amino acids and all the magic stuff, also pumps through every other inch of your body. So whenever you have an injury, I still maintain you should train, but just avoid touching the injured part as best you can. I know it's not the best answer I've ever given, but I always feel like I should have a fundraiser. Each day in America, people are afflicted with middle-aged pull-up syndrome. Well, thank you. Let me know how it goes and rest it, and let's see if that helps. Okay, thanks. Well, there you go. That was a fair number of questions today. Remember, if you have a question, send them to podcast@danjohnuniversity.com. Each and every week, I sit down here, and with episode 250 behind us, I'm kind of looking forward to the next 250, okay? And so until next time, let's all keep on listening, learning, and lifting. All right. Thanks so much. Bye-bye now.